The year is 1221. A city is screaming. You have been told that Genghis Khan was a whirlwind, a savage nomad who came, burned everything to ash, and then vanished back into the dust of the plains. You were told his empire died when he did. You were told a lie. What if I told you that the great Khan never actually left? What if the most terrifying part of his conquest wasn't the swords or the horses, but something buried deep inside the very people living today? We aren't just looking at history, we are looking at a biological takeover so quiet and so disturbing that it took 800 years for science to finally scream the truth. The ghost of Genghis Khan isn't in a grave. He's in the room with you right now. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. The sky over the city of Nishapur didn't turn black from clouds. It turned black from the soot of burning homes. For the people inside the walls, the world ended not with a whimper, but with the rhythmic, terrifying thunder of 100,000 hooves. This wasn't just a battle. This was an execution. To understand the man who would become a ghost in our DNA, you have to first understand the monster he became on the battlefield. Genghis Khan did not just want your land. He wanted your fear. He wanted to erase the very memory of anyone who dared to say no to him. When his army arrived at a city's gates, the choice was simple: kneel and become a servant, or stand and become dust. In this opening chapter of his bloody reign, the violence was loud. It was the sound of iron hitting bone. The Mongols were masters of psychological warfare. They didn't just kill. They engineered scenes of horror to ensure the next city would surrender before a single arrow was shot. They would stack skulls into massive pyramids, monuments to death that could be seen for miles. They would divert entire rivers to wash away a city so that not even a single brick remained to show it had ever existed. Historians often paint Genghis as a simple savage, a man of the wild with no plan other than destruction. But that is the first mistake people make. There was a cold, calculating brilliance behind every fire he set. He was dismantling the old world to make room for something new, something that belonged entirely to him. As the fires of Nishapur died down, a heavy, suffocating silence fell over the plains. The savage nomad had finished the loud part of his work. But as the blood soaked into the earth, a different kind of conquest was beginning. A conquest that didn't require a sword. A conquest that would ensure his name would live on, not just in books, but in the very blood of the survivors. The world thought the storm had passed, but in reality, the great Khan was just getting started. He was about to plant the seeds of a legacy so vast, it would eventually cover the entire planet. When the smoke finally cleared from the ruins of Central Asia, a strange and heavy silence settled over the Silk Road. The screaming had stopped. The pyramids of skulls were bleached white by the sun. To the outside observer, it looked like Genghis Khan had simply broken the world and moved on. But if you look closer at the primary sources, the journals of the men who traveled with him and the scribes who recorded his every word, you start to see a shift. The violence was no longer the main event. It had become a tool for something much deeper. This is where the story gets disturbing. This is the part the textbooks usually skip because it's uncomfortable. Genghis Khan realized that you can only rule a person with a sword for as long as you are holding it to their throat. But if you change who they are, if you weave yourself into the very fabric of their family, their blood, and their future, you rule them forever. The great Khan began to implement a system that was far more efficient than any massacre. As his armies moved from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe, they didn't just take gold and silk. They took people. Specifically, they took the spoils of war. In every city that fell, the most elite, the most beautiful, and the most influential were brought before the Khan and his sons. This wasn't just random cruelty, it was a biological strategy. While other kings were busy building monuments of stone that would eventually crumble, Genghis was building a monument of flesh and bone. He was creating a massive, sprawling family tree that would eventually wrap its branches around the entire continent. He once famously said that the greatest joy a man can have is to conquer his enemies and see those dear to them in tears. But his actions showed he had a second goal: to ensure that the next generation of the conquered would actually be his own children. Think about the scale of this. We are talking about a man who controlled nearly 12 million square miles. In every corner of that empire, from the freezing steppes of Siberia to the lush valleys of Persia, the Khan's seed was being planted. It was a conquest of the cradle. He was replacing the populations he had destroyed with a new lineage, his lineage. By the time Genghis Khan reached old age, he wasn't just a king. He was a biological phenomenon. He had created a system where his sons and grandsons would rule over the territories he won, continuing this same pattern for centuries. The world thought the Mongol Empire was about land. It wasn't. It was about a single man's DNA trying to outrun time itself. But how do we know this isn't just a legend? How do we know this quiet conquest actually worked? For hundreds of years, it was just a dark rumor. But recently, scientists decided to look under the microscope, and what they found was enough to make the world's skin crawl. For centuries, the story of Genghis Khan's biological conquest was treated like a campfire myth, a dark legend whispered to explain why so many noble families across Asia claimed to be his descendants. But in 2003, the myth hit the cold, hard wall of modern science. A group of geneticists from across the globe decided to stop looking at ancient scrolls and start looking at the blood of living men. What they found didn't just surprise the scientific community, it horrified them. As they mapped the Y-chromosomes of thousands of men across the former Mongol Empire, a terrifying pattern emerged. Usually, genetic markers are scattered and diverse, like a forest with thousands of different types of trees. But in this vast region of the world, they found a single superlineage. It was a specific genetic signature that didn't just appear here and there, it dominated. The data showed that roughly 1 in every 200 men alive on Earth today carries the exact same Y chromosome. That translates to about 16 million men. When the scientists traced this genetic explosion back through time using molecular clocks, the trail led straight to a single point in history, the early 13th century. It led directly to the heart of the Mongolian steppe. It led to Genghis Khan. This is the quieter and far more disturbing aspect of his legacy. While other conquerors are remembered for the cities they built or the laws they wrote, Genghis Khan is the only human being in history to have successfully hacked the human race. This wasn't a natural spread of a population. This was a directed, intentional, and massive biological takeover. Think about the implications for a moment. Most people struggle to keep their family name alive for 3 generations. This man managed to weave his DNA into the very fabric of the human species so deeply that 800 years of wars, plagues, and migrations haven't been able to wash it out. It is a form of immortality that no pyramid or gold-plated tomb could ever achieve. But the study revealed something even more unsettling. To achieve a genetic footprint this massive, it wasn't enough for just one man to be prolific. It required a systemic, multi-generational effort. It meant that his sons, his grandsons, and his great-grandsons, the rulers of the various khanates, continued this practice of biological displacement for over 200 years. They weren't just ruling over the people they conquered, they were literally replacing them one generation at a time. The savage nomad didn't just destroy civilizations. He rewrote the biological code of the continent. Every time you walk through a crowded street in a major city today, there is a statistical certainty that the ghost of the Great Khan is walking right beside you, hidden in the cells of a stranger. But as we dig deeper into the academic papers, we find that this wasn't just about having children. There was a darker, more calculated reason why this lineage survived when so many others vanished into the dust. It is one thing to have children. It is another thing entirely for those children to survive, thrive, and eventually dominate an entire continent. In nature, this is called selection. But in the story of Genghis Khan, it was something far more intentional and far more sinister. It was what some scholars call a genetic monopoly. To understand how one man's DNA could explode across the globe while millions of other lineages simply vanished, we have to look at the cold, hard laws of the Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan didn't just leave behind a family. He left behind a legal and social fortress that protected his bloodline above all else. This was the Yasa, his secret code of laws. Under the Yasa, the Golden Family, the direct descendants of Genghis, held absolute power. In the vast territories of the Mongol Empire, if you weren't part of this bloodline, you were a subject. But if you carried the Khan's DNA, you were a god. You were the only one allowed to sit on the throne. You were the only one who controlled the wealth of the Silk Road. And most importantly, you were the only one whose children were guaranteed to survive. While the rest of the world was dying from the brutal wars and the coming of the Black Death, the descendants of the Khan lived in unimaginable luxury. They had the best food, the best healers, and the most protection. This created a massive biological bottleneck. While the common people's lineages were being snuffed out by poverty and plague, the Khan's lineage was expanding at an exponential rate. But there is a darker side to this dark selection. In many of the conquered territories, the Mongols didn't just favor their own. They actively suppressed the reproductive success of the local elites. When a city was taken, the local kings, princes, and leaders were often the first to be executed. Their sons were killed to prevent any future rebellions. In one stroke of a blade, centuries of local genetic history were wiped off the map. By removing the competition and replacing it with his own sons, Genghis Khan performed a biological clearing. He turned the human population of Asia into a garden where only one type of seed was allowed to grow. Academic papers on this superlineage suggest that this wasn't just a happy accident of history. It was a successful social selection. The Mongol social structure was built to act as a pump, pushing the Khan's DNA into every corner of the empire while draining the life out of everyone else's. As we look at the primary sources from the era, we find stories of the 4 great Khanates. Each one was ruled by a branch of his family. From the Golden Horde in Russia to the Yuan dynasty in China, the story was the same. The rulers were all cousins. They were a single, massive, continental family business. This brings us to a chilling realization. The savage nomad wasn't just a destroyer. He was a master of human engineering. He understood that to truly own the future, you don't just need to control the land. You need to control the people who will walk upon it. But as the centuries passed, something even more disturbing began to happen. The empire eventually fell. The cities were rebuilt. The Mongol horsemen went back to the steppes. But the DNA didn't go anywhere. It stayed, and it began to hide. We have reached the end of the map. We started with the fire of burning cities and the screams of the conquered. We watched as the savage nomad transformed into a biological architect, trading his sword for a legacy that would never rust. Now, we have to face the most disturbing truth of all, the reality of the world we live in right now. When you look in the mirror, or when you look at the people passing you on the street, you aren't just looking at individuals. You are looking at the survivors of a massive 800-year-old filtration system. The genetic studies we discussed earlier, the ones showing that 16 million men carry the Khan's DNA, are just the tip of the iceberg. Those studies only track the Y-chromosome, which is passed from father to son. If we were to count the descendants who carry his DNA through their mothers, the number wouldn't be 16 million. It would likely be hundreds of millions. Genghis Khan achieved what no other human in history ever could. He didn't just conquer the world, he became the world. Think about the textbook history we are taught. We are told that great men change the world through their ideas, their laws, or their inventions. But the story of the great Khan suggests a much darker, more primal reality. It suggests that history is actually driven by biology. The hidden legacy we uncovered through academic papers and genetic mapping tells us that the most successful idea in human history wasn't a religion or a political system. It was a single man's drive to survive and replicate at any cost. The quieter and far more disturbing aspect of this story is that we are all living in a world designed by his success. The structures of power, the way cities are laid out, and the very makeup of our global population are the echoes of a storm that started in the year 1206. We like to think we are modern, civilized, and far removed from the savage past. But our very blood tells a different story. We are the children of the conquerors, or we are the children of those who were fast enough, smart enough, or lucky enough to survive them. There is no middle ground. As you finish this story, look around you. The ghost of Genghis Khan isn't in a museum. He isn't buried in a hidden tomb in the mountains of Mongolia. He is a living, breathing part of the human machine. He is in the DNA of the stranger sitting next to you. He is in the power structures that still rule our world. And for millions of you watching, he is literally a part of who you are. The conquest didn't end when the great Khan took his last breath. It didn't end when the Mongol Empire fell. It is happening right now, in every heartbeat of the millions who carry his mark. The world was broken, yes, but it was rebuilt in his image. The story of Genghis Khan is far from over. In fact, as long as we continue to breathe, it will never end. If you enjoy dark untold history, subscribe because we uncover what others won't.